This episode of the Debrief will have a slightly different format. Today we'll be conducting a critical incident review of an actual event. We'll discuss the timeline of the event, as well as the aftermath, recovery, and the lessons learned. Our goal in this discussion is not to criticize or second guess any actions taken by those responding to the event. Their actions are beyond reproach, their bravery is without question, and their sacrifices are real and need to be honored. It is our hope that by discussing this event, we will learn from it and hope to improve operator safety in the future. With regards to form, we'll be using the officers' actual names because they're heroes and they need to be remembered. For obvious reasons, we will not be using the suspect's name.
My name is John Becker. For the past 4 decades, I've dedicated my life to protecting tactical operators. During this time, I've worked with many of the world's top law enforcement and military units. As a result, I've had the privilege of working with the amazing leaders who take teams into the world's most dangerous situations. The goal of this podcast is to share their stories in hopes of making us all better leaders, better thinkers, and better people. Welcome to the Debrief.
My guest today is James Buddy Brown. Buddy is a former United States Marine who is currently an investigator with the York County, South Carolina Sheriff's Office. In his 22-year career, Buddy has worked a variety of assignments, including property crimes, financial crimes, narcotics, and 18 years in SWAT. On January 16, 2018, York County experienced an incident that began with a domestic violence 911 call, and by the time it was over, had resulted in the death of Detective Mike Doty, as well as the shooting of K-9 Sergeant Randy Clinton, Sergeant Kyle Cummings, and Buddy. Buddy has graciously agreed to sit down with me and walk us through the events of that evening. Buddy, thank you for joining me on the Debrief.
Thank you for having me, John.
Why don't we start with kind of your personal history, your career and kind of how you got to here.
Grew up in South Carolina, went to school there. 1987, joined the Marine Corps, was in the United States Marine Corps from 1987 to 1995, here in California, actually. Got out of there, worked construction for a couple years while I was getting into law enforcement. Started in law enforcement in 2000, worked there, started with a small city department, and then eventually moved to York County where I worked there, worked my way through patrol, like you said before, worked narcotics. I've worked in investigations and spent 18 years on SWAT. I ran the department's response to active shooter program for about 10 or 12 years. Was started with when we implemented a patrol rifle program. I worked through that where we wrote the lesson plans and the training and kind of implemented with a couple other guys, the patrol rifle program for our agency. Did a lot in training with SWAT, training, teaching, being a firearms instructor, those kind of things. That's always been kind of my passion.
So talk to me a little bit about your agency. Like, how big is it?
We work with it's the York County Sheriff's Office in South Carolina. We're directly south of Charlotte, so we have a lot of interaction with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. We're about 200 sworn, plus we have a jail where we do the jail. We're a full-service sheriff's office. We do calls for service. We cover the unincorporated areas of the county, calls for service there. We do serve civil papers. We handle the jail. We've got 4 districts throughout the county, kind of in a CompStat style system. We run that. Each district is kind of different. You have 2 districts that are kind of rural and 2 districts that kind of are a little more urban with their proximity to Charlotte, North Carolina. So you really get a lot of variety in the ways you can police in York County.
Talk to me about your team. How big's the team?
Currently, at the time of this, we had about 25 to 30 members. Right now, we're up to about 40 members, we have truck drivers, we have medics, we have the snipers, we have our regular operators, we have an intelligence guy, an intelligence and safety guy. The York County Sheriff's Office and the Rock Hill Police Department are the 2 large agencies within the county. Rock Hill Police has their own SWAT team. The Sheriff's Office picks up the smaller agencies. If they want to put their people on the SWAT team, they can do that. We have a lot of multi-jurisdictional teams in the county. Our forensics is multi-jurisdictional, our drug enforcement unit is multi-jurisdictional, and our SWAT team is multi-jurisdictional.
So how many agencies are there in that in the configuration of the team?
We have guys from the Fort Mill Police Department, the York Police Department, the Clover Police Department, and the TKK Police Department. So there's four different agencies that are supplying guys to the team.
Plus York County.
Plus York County.
So a total of 5 agencies.
Yes, total of 5 agencies.
So, Buddy, set the stage for me. January 15th, 2018. What's the area like? What's the weather like? Kind of give me the environment.
Well, and that's the big thing about South Carolina is we have 4 very distinct seasons. You know, every season has its difference. It's very hot in the summer. It's very cold in the winter. Spring and fall, you know, you get the in between. January is the middle of our winter, and generally January and February are the really cold times. And it was especially cold on this evening. It was 18 degrees, I think, when we were out there. Our 911 center gets a domestic call from the incident location. Male and female there, both been drinking a lot. She's claiming that she's been assaulted by him. Come to find out, she had poured his liquor out in the sink. While the call is going on, you can hear him assaulting her. While they're on the phone and she's calling they're trying to get the deputies out there. He grabs a AK-47 and a bag, kind of a go bag of supplies, and he heads out. You know, and it's very cold. It's like 18 degrees outside, and he takes off from the house.
So give me an idea, like this is rural South Carolina,
yes,
right?
This is
like,
very rural. Where we were at was a housing development, but it was probably on acre lots, acre to acre and a half lots. So there's a lot of room between the houses. It's a pretty rural area. There's a lot of woods. There's a lot of places for somebody to hide or to take off on foot and be able to get gone.
So where is the suspect at this point? He leaves the house.
He
Where
leaves
does
the
he
house.
go?
He's in the wood line. He actually was. We had discovered in investigating after that he was a guy that liked to walk. He was like a hiker and liked to get out and walk. And there were paths, and like we have a lot of ATV 4-wheelers. People ride ATVs and 4-wheelers a lot, and there was a lot of 4-wheeler trails. And he had gone back and hit a horse 4-wheeler trail that was near the house and was on it. Around 10:20, the deputies arrived. They decided to call out our K-9. When our K-9 guy got there, it was Sergeant Randy Clinton. He had at that time, he had over 30 years experience running dogs. You know, teaches K-9 all over the state, one of the premier, dog handlers in the state. He doesn't really like what's going on, so he calls for the state helicopter, which is like an hour away. And it's not like our state helicopter is sitting down there, spooling up, ready to go. So it takes probably till about 11 o'clock or so, 11:30, takes an hour or so for them to get the helicopter up there. And also around that same time, around 11:30 on the 15th, SWAT page went out for a couple of additional runners to go with the dog team. When we know that somebody's armed or poses a little bit more of a threat, we'll have our SWAT guys go and run with the K-9 guys to give them a little bit extra cover with rifles and the equipment that we have available for SWAT.
Okay.
So the helicopter was there when they started with the dog, and they wanted to just let him sweep the area before they struck out with the dog.
And how long is it before they make contact with the suspect?
At about 1 o'clock, the K-9 started the track. At about 1:10 is when the dog team got ambushed. They're on the track. They're coming up a trail, and they come up on the trail, and the suspect was hidden up behind some trees and just kind of opened up with them when they came around the corner, and just started shooting.
They don't have night vision on at this point.
The K-9,
dog, the K-9s.
no, they do not.
Okay. And it's dark.
It's dark. They do run some lights. There's some lights and stuff that they run for the dog, and also that you kind of have to have as dark as it is. It wasn't a lot of moonlight that night. It wasn't like a bright, because there's sometimes where you can operate at night and the moon will give you enough light to where you can kind of see what was going on. This wasn't one of those nights.
Okay.
It was very dark.
So the suspect's basically lying in wait for them.
Yes, he was lying in wait for him, and they were behind a house down there off of Ferrier Lane, which was less than a quarter of a mile from the incident location, from where the domestic happened at. One of the guys on the dog team returns fire, kind of suppresses him. The suspect gets up and gets gone. They drag Randy out of the woods. He's shot in the left leg. They put a tourniquet on him, drag him out of the woods. Lieutenant Heath Clevenger was there. He was kind of the instant commander that was there. He figures out where Randy is, drives his vehicle down there to him. It was a little bit difficult to find where he actually was in conjunction, in the dark, trying not to put a lot of light out to figure out exactly which house he was at. So they had a little bit of communication issues there getting that done. Finds the house. They load Randy in the car. He takes off with him. He had a Ford Explorer at the time. Load him in the Explorer. He takes off with him. They try to make contact with the hospital. They had a ambulance kind of on standby. When we do things like that, we'll put medic on standby. And the ambulance was the opposite way from the way the hospital was. So Heath just took him in the car.
Okay, so Heath throws Randy in the car, takes him to the hospital.
Straight to the hospital. So as Heath is getting Randy, they're getting Randy into the car, Heath gives a rifle to the guys, to Lieutenant Ligon that was there, gives him a rifle. Here's my rifle, use this. And then Heath leaves to take Randy so that Mike has a rifle. He didn't initially have a rifle when he went out there.
Okay. So now when Heath evacuates Randy, what do the other guys do?
They left Cole. They had Cole Green, Mike Laurencio, and Lieutenant Ligon. And they made the decision that they were going to leave Cole Green at the scene where Randy's shooting happened because they wanted somebody to be able to find the crime scene again. So they left him there. Laurencio and Ligon continued on. By then, the sled helicopter had picked up the bad guy.
Okay.
And had him walking down. While all this was going on, the bad guy started shooting at the sled helicopter. He shoots the helicopter, turns around and starts walking away, and they have him on FLIR. They're tracking him on FLIR, and Ligon and Laurencio are continuing to move in the same general direction that the suspect is.
So now is the suspect walking back towards his house?
No, he's walking away.
Walking away from his house.
He's found a power line, and he's trucking down that power line away from the house.
Okay, so it just, I'm a city boy, so the power lines are running like through the middle of a forest. They'll cut a clear spot.
Yes, they'll cut a clear spot. It's called they call it right away.
Okay.
They'll cut a clear spot so they can get in there and do maintenance on the poles.
So I do remember something. They kind of lost the dog for a while too, right?
They did. When the shooting happened, Randy let go of the dog, and the dog kind of took off. And when everything calmed down, she came back.
Okay.
And the dog was fine. It was kind of a funny thing as all this stuff was going on, and the people were very concerned that the dog had gotten shot. They were very concerned about the canine that our public information officer had to go on the news and say, the dog is fine, the dog didn't get shot, and show a picture of her running around in the kennels. Because they were concerned that we had gotten injured, but they were also very concerned that if the dog had gotten shot.
Yeah, it's that happens out here too. Police officer gets shot, people are like, oh yeah, it's kind of sad. Dog gets shot.
Oh yeah,
community
it's
outrage.
the end of the world. Yes.
Yeah.
Now there is a perimeter that is set up outside of what's going on. The deputies have set a perimeter up, but Mike and Chris are following along with the helicopter guiding them. And when all this stuff happens, when Heath goes to grab the Randy, he jumps on the radio and says, have the rest of SWAT respond out code 3, which is our, lights and sirens, get there. So when the initial call came out for canine runners, I had called in and said, hey, I'm available if you need a canine runner. And they were like, no, we're good right now, but stay dressed. Because I got up and put on my thermal, my cold weather gear. They said, stay dressed because we're probably gonna have to come out on this guy, after a while.
Got it.
So we get the second call. I jump up, grab my gear, jump in the car. We drive out there. Now the page, when we would get SWAT pages, we would just get SWAT respond to this location, code 3, or sometimes it would be SWAT respond to this location, normal run. They'd give us an address, respond here, code 3 or normal run. So they gave us, there was nothing in the page or anything that was going on that let us know that Randy had been shot. We had no idea. It was just respond. So we get out there to the scene. I live not a long way from there. I was one of the closer guys to there. So I was one of the first ones to get there. So we get there It's pandemonium. It's helicopters flying. We got 2 of our guys that are still chasing. There's myself, Grady Gonzalez, and then there was a dog guy named Chris Kinsey. We all kind of got there at the same time. And at the same time, our head SWAT medic, Chuck Haynes, was on scene also. So I'm throwing my gear on. Grady's throwing his gear on. Chris has got his stuff. And we decide that we are going to load up in, Grady had a unmarked Explorer. We're going to load up in that Explorer and let him drive us to where, go find Ligon and Laurencio and go support those guys.
Okay.
So we load up.
So you're going to go fall in with them.
Yes, that's our plan, is to go find them and let's get some more guys to those guys.
Got it.
So we jump in the car, we get all geared up, we jump in the car, we go to the beginning, the entrance kind of to the neighborhood, and people can't stop talking on the radio long enough for me to call Ligon and say, hey, I got 3 guys, we're coming to you, where you at? So it's just so.
So you guys are all on one frequency at this point?
We're all on one frequency at this point.
Okay.
So, and it was pretty crazy. So we're driving around, in the dark, and Chris comes out and gets us, and we go. So we're going to, our plan, while this activation is happening, our truck drivers have been activated. So they're going to get our equipment trucks and we have an unarmored Bearcat. Our plan was, helicopter keeps the suspect in sight. He knows where he is. We get the armored vehicle there. We load up in it. We drive to where he is, and we do what we have to do. We take him into custody, or we do
engage him from the armor, from the turret.
armor, from inside, from the safety of that. So that plan went all to crap, but that was the plan. You always have a plan until you get punched in the face.
That's in the words of Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face.
So we're down there, and we link up, and we do this danger crossing on the power line. We do all that. We're out there, moving around, and helicopter comes across and says, "Hey guys, we got to leave. We're bingo fuel. We've stayed as long as we can stay. We're out of gas." So the Bearcat hadn't made it there quite yet. So they get there about the time that the helicopter has to leave. The Bearcat shows up.
Well, and just for context, on bingo fuel for the helicopter, those guys stayed until they damn near ran out of gas.
Yes, they did run out of gas.
Yeah, just not there, but on the way back to the airport.
Yes, they were headed back to the airport and started to flame out and had to land the helicopter in a Walmart parking lot.
All right, we got to go. There's just a flame out on us.
10-4, thank you. We'll do our best to get to him quick.
800, said 504.
Go ahead, 504.
We didn't make the airport.
10-4.
Is there any way we can get somebody? I know you got a lot going on right there, but we really need to get that fuel truck to us.
They found a Walmart parking lot and landed.
There's bingo fuel, and then there's bingo fuel.
They were bingo.
Bingo. Yeah.
And there is no doubt in my mind that they helped save lives out there by staying as long as they did and keeping an eye on him and letting us know so that we didn't walk into another ambush.
Okay, so buddy, the Bearcat gets there.
Bearcat gets there. We load the guys up in the back of the Bearcat. We have our handheld FLIRs, we have our night vision, we have spotlights on the Bearcat. All these things, we're going to use them to try to see if we can locate this guy. You kind of have to be careful with it where you take it off-road because it's a big, heavy truck and it's easy to get stuck. So we turn around where we're at, drive past where the command post is, and then we're going to go back in on the power line and drive down to where the last sighting was before the helicopter had to leave. And when we're driving down there, I jump up in the turret. Our Bearcat has a turret, but it's not one of the completely covering. It's just one piece of armor that sticks up. Yeah. And it's not nearly as much cover as you think it is.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah.
So we started driving down there.
Well, when you don't know where the suspect is.
Yeah, and we started
90
driving down
degrees
there,
is not enough.
And I'm thinking, I really don't know where this guy is, and I'm just sticking my head up here. So we kind of went down and buttoned everything up and used, the windows, and we have ports in the Bearcat. So no joy. We were probably there for 30, 45 minutes, looking, kind of trying to figure out where he was at. While we were there, we hear the Charlotte-Mecklenburg sent their helicopter down to where we were. We hear them arrive on scene, but we can't talk to them. And we discovered that our comms weren't compatible. We're all on the same 800 megahertz system, but we didn't have their channels in our radios. So we could hear them talking a little, but we couldn't talk back to them and tell them what we needed. And much to Charlotte's credit, they sent an officer down with radios so that they could go to the command post and relay what was going on with their helicopter. While we were down there, we kind of decided that we were going to go to 2 channels because there was so much talk on, they were running the perimeter, running everything off of 1 channel. So at that point, I think they put Stephen Ramsey in charge of the perimeter and moved them to a different channel, and then put us on our own channel, for SWAT team to command, and then command had another channel to perimeter.
Got it.
So we were, the perimeter still could hear what we were doing, but it wasn't everybody trying to talk on the same channel at the same time, which was a problem. And one of the things, and we'll get to this a little bit later, and one of the things that kind of gets me is when we were in the Bearcat, I noticed that not everybody had all the gear that they were supposed to have on, because we were, this thing had developed from a dog call now into this SWAT call. So you had guys that kind of had armor setups for running a dog call, and not armor setups for going after a guy with an AK-47. They still had some soft armor, didn't have helmets, didn't have the stuff that they should have on in there. And thought about it, and while we were sitting in there, that, hey, this guy or that guy needs to have their different armor on. But at the point that we were at as a team at that time, I didn't want to say anything to them because I didn't want it to turn into a thing where they got yelled at by somebody else. So I just kind of let that go. And not one of my best moments. I feel like personally, I feel like I should have said something to him about that. That goes on. Lieutenant Clevenger takes Randy to the hospital. Sherriff, more canine guys. They get Randy's wife. They get them all down to the hospital. Heath goes to the sheriff and says, "Hey, you guys seem to, because if you're the guy that brings the guy in, you stay with him, until you're relieved."
Yeah.
He goes to the sheriff and says, "Hey, there's plenty of people here to take care of Randy. I need to get back out to where SWAT is." And the sheriff's like, "Yeah, I need you back out there." So while this is going on, and this is South Carolina, and Heath had given his rifle to Mike Ligon, his duty rifle to him, he asked the sheriff if he could grab another rifle that he had with a similar setup and use it, and if it would be okay for him to use that. And the sheriff okayed that. So Heath called his wife on the way back to the call and said, "Hey, grab my rifle with the red dot on it and meet me at this location." And his wife brought the rifle to him, and he grabbed it and took off. So as we were coming, we had kind of used up everything that we could on the power line initially, where we were there with the Bearcat, and we pulled out and pulled back to the command post. So we're back at the command post. Lieutenant Ligon and Lieutenant Clevenger go out, and they're talking with the sheriff and the command up there to kind of figure out what our next steps are going to be. And while they're doing that, the sled helicopter, we had gotten a fuel truck to the sled helicopter, gotten him fueled up, he came back in. He's circulating the area of the last sighting, and he comes across the radio and tells us that there's a boat behind a house off of Paraham Road. We call them John boats, like a
flat bottom,
what do the Cajuns call them? Pirogue,
yeah,
like a pirogue or a flat bottom, a little flat bottom John boat that you would generally row, And he says they've got this John boat out the back of the house, and it's got a heat signature near it. Now, it's, as we talked about before, it's 20 degrees outside. It's freezing cold. As far as we know, this guy hasn't taken a coat or taken any kind of cold weather gear with him. So we're thinking he's pretty cold. So it would be, well within the realm of possibilities that he's out there hidden under this boat. So at that time, we decide that we're going to load up in the Bearcat, and we're going to go to this house on Paraham Road. It's 1475, and we're going to go there and deploy, and see if we can find this boat, challenge this guy, see what we're going to do with that. So we load up in the Bearcat, we drive over there, and it's not very far from where the command post was, or from where this whole thing started. And earlier in the evening, the resident at 1475 had called in and said that a motion light had gone off in the back of his house. We didn't have that information at the time, but it was information that was out there in the ether, but I don't remember us getting that particular information. Hey guys, in the Bearcat, go in there. A security light went off an hour ago at that house. The guy called in about it. I think it made it to command, but it didn't make it all the way down that that had gone on, or it may have, and we didn't hear it, or there was a lot of chaos going on. The dispatch comes across the radio and says, there's some lady at an address like a mile from where we are that says that she thinks she saw somebody walking in her backyard with night vision. Now, I don't know if she had night vision and saw somebody walking in her backyard, which I don't think was the case, or she thought she saw somebody wearing night vision walking around in her backyard, which none of our guys were over there. So, and I didn't like it at the time, but the sled helicopter leaves to go investigate that as we're driving down the driveway to where we're going to check out this boat, that's turned over.
So do you have no air cover at that point?
We did, but it was the Charlotte that we couldn't communicate with. And we didn't know it. We didn't know that they were up there. So our guy leaves, our helicopter leaves to go do that. And we pull up to the house, and like we said, it's 20 degrees. It's dark. It's 3:30 in the morning. I've had a couple hours sleep. I laid down at like 9 o'clock and was back up at, I laid it down at like 10 and I was back up at 1. I'd worked the whole day, slept for a couple hours, and now I'm back out on this. Now it's 3:30 in the morning. I thought that this was a brick house until I went back out to it, and it's actually it's a big log cabin house. So, and just the way your mind, processes things. We pull up in the Bearcat and we get a plan in there. It was kind of funny in the way that things change because, as you have pictures of the houses, it's a nice house with a nice yard, and we didn't want to drive the Bearcat too far into their yard. Just, the way your thinking changed. We didn't want to drive the Bearcat too far in their yard and rut their yard up and have them calling the sheriff and being mad at us.
If you didn't find the suspect. You
didn't find the suspect. Now we've tore their yard up. We've done all this stuff, or we've run over their septic tank. We got a lot of septic tanks and stuff out there. So we didn't drive the Bearcat that far we drove it pretty far in the yard, but not as far as we could have. So we drive in there and we make a plan. And initially, myself, Mike Doty, and Kyle Cummins were going to go left. We were going to get out of Bearcat. We were going to go left. Heath, Grady, Mike, and Judd were going to get out of Bearcat, and they were going to go right.
So you guys are going to split the house.
And that was the plan.
Because you're in front, basically in the front yard.
We're in the front yard of the house. We believe that the boat is going to be back directly behind the house.
Okay.
So our plan is to take one team around the right side of the house, take one team around the left side of the house, and then link up and be on each side of where this boat is. In a perfect world, we call out to the guy, he throws his hands up, he comes out, everything's cool. We take him into custody. But we really believe, based on the intelligence that we had from the helicopter, that he was going to be out there in that boat. That's, we probably believed that a little too much, honestly, in hindsight. So just a quick second on that. The kid there was two other people that were in the Bearcat when all this was going on. There was a guy named Charlie Threet, and Charlie's a guy that he's on SWAT now and has been on SWAT a couple years, but he was driving trucks at the time, and that call was his first time driving the Bearcat. Mike Doty had told Mike Chanel when the Bearcat got there, jump in the front seat and be there in case we need a medic. So Mike Chanel's in the front passenger, Charlie's driving the truck. First SWAT call he'd ever been on, first time driving the truck is this. We were initially, like I said, we were supposed to go left. Mike was always a kind of a go-get-em kind of guy.
Mike Doty,
yes. And Mike jumps out of the truck and goes right. I yell at Mike a little bit to get him back to where I was so we could work together. I was on night vision, so I was on point with night vision in my rifle. Mike was about a double arm's length off of me at about 9 o'clock, and then Kyle was at about 6 o'clock, trailing behind. And when we got out of the truck, in South Carolina, sometimes you have where people will build little platforms off their houses, like little wooden patio kind of things.
Yeah, like a deck.
Like a deck, but it's only like this far off the ground.
Yep.
It's not something that somebody could get under. So when I come out of the truck and I see this on night vision at 3 o'clock in the morning, it looks like just a little platform. So we start making our way around the edge of the house. Now it is January. All the leaves are off the trees, and there's a wood line, and then there's the house, and there's a path, kind of a yard, kind of in between the two. Well, I thought about jumping us into the wood line, but with the leaves on the ground, I felt like we would sound like a herd of elephants coming through there. So we kind of shaded our way over towards the wood line, but stayed in the yard area.
Got it.
Because I would have liked to have the cover, and we still believed that our contact was going to be from in front of us where we were out looking that way.
Into the John boat,
Into
which
the John boat,
which is in the woods.
Which is in the woods out by the pond.
Got it.
Which the way we were moving would still be out like 12 o'clock, like out in front of us.
Got it.
So as we start moving around the house, I'm on night vision, we're moving. The ground, I noticed that the ground is starting to drop off. So as the ground is dropping off, I'm on my rifle. I come off my rifle and take my hand and point it out and say, hey, you guys check under that deck. And as soon as I point my hand and say, you guys check under that deck, the suspect starts shooting at us. And Mike gets shot immediately. I get shot in the hip, in the handguard of my rifle. The round went through the top of my handguard. It should have taken the gas tube out of it, but it didn't. And I took a round to my helmet. I kind of roll myself kind of over into the woods, and I return fire. I've seen people say, oh, I got shot and I never knew it. When I got shot, I knew exactly what had happened. It felt like somebody had taken a sledgehammer and hit me in the hip. It was like, oh, I know what that is. And this is, and it was that. There was a, you see movies and stuff where you see people get shot and they cut flips and they do all this crazy stuff. I just kind of got hit and turned and kind of stood there for what seemed like a really long time. And then was like, and it probably was, split second, but it was like, I really need to be somewhere else other than right here. And we had always trained when we did simulations or when we did force-on-force training that you never quit. You never do, oh, I'm hit, I'm dead, I stop. It was always you continue to fight, you push on. So I rolled over into the woods. I don't remember this, but Kyle said that I lit him up with my flashlight where the bad guy was. I light up, I see where he is. I remember, and I talk about this when I teach concealed weapons, when we talk about, knowing your target and what's behind it. I remember seeing the block wall that's the bottom of the house, like the foundation of the house, behind where he was shooting at us from or where he was at. And I remember thinking, okay, I've got a backstop in there. And I started shooting and Kyle started shooting in on the suspect at that time.
And on this deck, there's a hot tub sunk down in the deck,
he's like around, well, we found that later on. He was kind of hidden down back behind the hot tub.
Got it. So he's got at a minimum concealment.
He's got a good,
actually probably cover.
And there was a bunch of 4x4 poles that were littered in between, the whole area. So he's in a good position. And we kind of had to fight our way, we had to fight our way through, the ambush with it. Kyle, I start returning fire with my rifle. Kyle starts returning fire with his rifle. His rifle jams, and he transitioned to his handgun and continued to to fire with his handgun. And then in the ensuing gunfight, Kyle was struck and went down. So I'm down in the woods and Kyle's down in the woods. So while all this is going on, the team that Heath is leading goes around the left side of the house. So as they're about halfway down the left side of the house, because the house was L-shaped, so we had gone to this corner, they were still back over here in this corner.
So they've got a longer way around
Yes.
than you guys did. So even though you separate at the same time,
Yes.
they're now behind you.
Correct.
Got it.
And one of the things that me and Heath have talked about is we should have set up a point. We should have talked a little bit more before we deployed, and we should have gotten together and said, hey, I'm going to go to this point, you go to this point, and then we get together on the radio. This hindsight 2020.
Yeah, I've always.
That let's find some points, get there, and then establish communication and know where we were at, because we didn't do that. And while they're coming around the back of the house, the gunfight is going on. And they still believe that the suspect's supposed to be back here where this boat is. We didn't have any lasers, we didn't have any cans, we didn't have anything like that that differentiated us from, and from who was who. So they held up. So they didn't realize It took them a while to realize that the bad guy was under the deck, and I was in the woods and Kyle was in the woods.
Got it.
So they come around. One of their guys from the other team ends up engaging back towards the deck in there in the midst of that fight. He saw some muzzle flash, and he engaged that muzzle flash into there. I've rolled myself into the woods. I'm engaging him back in under there. The shooting stops. I feel like he stopped shooting at us. I don't know if I've eliminated him, but I feel like he stopped shooting at us. And out of my peripheral vision, I see, like if somebody's running and their weapon light is on their gun.
Yeah.
And the dot,
that bouncy light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I see the bouncy light and I see legs coming. And I'm laying down there and I'm proned out, and everything. So, and then they end up moving up and finding Mike Doty, finding that one of our guys is down in the yard, that there was a guy down in the yard. And Grady Gonzalez runs up and's like, just lay down, we're good. So I just kind of put my head down. And I know now that it was Mike, but I remember in that moment seeing what I thought was a pile of clothes or just like a pile, something laying there, and couldn't comprehend what that was. So I just kind of laid down there. There's a point during the gunfight that Heath gets on the radio and wants me to tell him where we're at.
Buddy, tell us where you're at. We want to know where you're at, so we'll get some muzzle flash.
Because he sees the gunfight going on. I have no recollection of that conversation happening.
You'd been shot at that point?
Yes, I'd been shot at that point. And I was on a Delta 4 helmet with headphone, earphones, everything, and there's, it was that auditory, we talk about auditory exclusion and tunnel vision and stuff like that. That was completely auditory excluded.
Well, to be fair, you'd been shot in the head with an AK-47 and a ballistic helmet had stopped it.
Yes.
That it's not really designed to stop.
So I guess if
you
I didn't
had
hear
a
that,
raging concussion, I would guess at that point.
yeah, probably so.
Yeah.
So those guys came around from the other side. Heath was coming from the other side, shines a light under the deck, sees the guy under the deck. By now, he's gone into surrender. Okay, he's behind his rifle. He's gone into surrender. We found out, I was testifying in a trial not too long ago, and there was the SLED, our state law enforcement division, has their firearms division worked this case, and they let me know that, and I always thought this, but I didn't know it, the AK that he had, we shot it so much that it wouldn't fire. They had to stick a screwdriver through the trigger to get it to fire when they test fired it for the investigation. So it was inoperable after we had shot. After the gunfight between me and Kyle and him, his gun was inoperable.
So he surrenders because he's run out of guns.
He surrenders because his gun's dead. His gun's gone down. It was hard. I mean, and it was hard, and it's something that, a lot of us struggled with the fact that, he took Mike's life and he lived. But, everything happens for a reason, and it happens the way that it's supposed to happen. And they made the absolute best decision, that could be made. And they go ahead and decide that they're going to bring the medics in. They call for medics, and one of the guys gets on the radio and is just, he's upset. This is probably one of the most horrible things he's ever seen. And he's so loud on the radio that you can't understand what he's saying. And you can't, we know that something bad has happened. They know that something bad's happened, but you can't figure out what had happened.
809, go ahead.
Stand by, we have two. Enemies down, 30 down. Yes. Suspect is at gunpoint. Suspect at gunpoint. The backpack at gunpoint. Get ready to capture now. Can't copy. Repeat. We can't hear you. We need two medics down here at this house right now, ASAP. We got two down. We got the suspect at gunpoint. He is up underneath the house. He's following verbal command.
So they He gets on the radio. Hey, we need medics back here. We got guys down. We need them ASAP. I've got the suspect at gunpoint. And when I was in the hospital, and I'm going to get back to but this is kind of important for this part. When I didn't see Heath for it's like a good solid day, because he had to do his debrief and I was in surgery, and he comes to the room and we talk about, what we could have done different. And I told him, I said, I hope that if the roles were reversed and I had to be on your side and I was on your side and you were on my side, that I would have done as good a job as you did. Because he really did a great job over there and kind of took a chaotic situation and kind of calmed everything down. So we had our Bearcat and the Rock Hill City Police Department's SWAT team. They have an MRAP.
Okay.
They had their MRAP out there, and their guys drove the MRAP to where we were. And actually, Rock Hill's team guys were they were the closest. That was a team. They were the closest to get to where we were. So they got there with our medics and started working on us. Somebody came across the radio, and it may have been Heath, and said, let's get our guys out.
Yeah.
I've got him. I've got the suspect. If he does anything, it'll be the last thing he does.
Yeah.
Let's get our guys out.
It's a good decision.
Their plan was they had enough guns on him that if he did something stupid, they were just going to shoot him, and then they would haul us out. So the guy, Chris Rowe, comes over to me. He's one of the Rock Hill Police Department guys, and they roll me over and they start doing they're evaluating to see where my wounds are. And they go to take my vest off. Well, the vest that the city has is different than the vest that we have. So they pull my side panels and try to flip it over. They take my helmet off. They pull the side panels and they try to flip the front of my vest up over my head and hit me right in the face with it. Whap! With a plate and everything and magazines and hit me right in the face with it. I'm like, ow! So they pull it off my head and they start working on me, and they decide they're going to pick me up and move me out of the hot zone that we're in and take me over where the Bearcat is. Well, I'm 260 pounds of dead weight with a concussion, with a leg wound that isn't being a lot of help for anything. And they pick me up and they drop me. And they drag me a couple feet and they drop me. And we have a guy on our team, Carlos Colberth. And Carlos is a big, strong guy, power lifts, just a strong dude. And he's got like a unique voice. And I know I've been working with Carlos for 15 years. And he come up behind me and he grabbed me under my arms and was like, I got you, buddy. And he drugged me by himself almost all the way back to the Bearcat. And after that, he told me, he says, I really need to work on my legs. But we did, they put a tourniquet on me. They tourniqueted my leg. And that was pretty unpleasant because it worked. I mean,
So you're shot high up in the hip.
Yes, I'm shot high up in the leg.
No bone.
No bones, just flesh,
and femoral vein, right?
Femoral vein, yes.
So you're bleeding out pretty
I'm bleeding
fast.
internally.
Yeah.
I'm not, what's the fancy? I'm not exsanguating, I'm bleeding internally. So Kyle, on the other hand, they went to Kyle first. Kyle was the first one that they got to. He was hitting the femoral artery, and he was bleeding out.
Got it.
And they couldn't get a tourniquet on him, and luckily Chuck Haynes came in, stuck his finger in the wound and got it stopped bleeding and packed it and put a tourniquet on it and got his bleeding under control. But it was very touch and go for Kyle. And I firmly believe that if we hadn't had the medics with the experience that we had on scene, we'd have lost Kyle out there too. It would have been bad. And they had already gone in and got Mike and put him in an ambulance, and they had taken him out to the to the LZ.
Mike is hit in the head?
He's hit in the head, yeah. And I didn't know. Mike was gone. Mike, in that time where I laid my head down and passed out for just a second, they had picked up Mike and got him out of there. He was long gone before they ever started working on me. They did CPR on Mike and brought him back on the scene. They got him breathing at the scene, which was a big thing because Mike was an organ donor. And getting him breathing at the scene allowed him to be able to later on to donate his organs, which was important to him, which was a good thing. So we get there. They're working on me. Chris Rowe comes in and puts a tourniquet on. My leg is already swelling. My stomach is swelling and turning black and blue as they're cutting my clothes, and they're cutting my clothes off, and it's 20 degrees outside. And they're dropping me on the ground, and, it's just...
And you got a concussion.
And I got a concussion.
And they hit you in the face with a vest.
And they hit me in the face with a vest. So, it's not the greatest day I've ever had in the world. They brought a pickup truck in that one of the investigators had and backed it in, and they loaded Kyle into the truck. Put him in first. They carried Kyle's he's like a 170-pound normal size guy. So they kind of just picked him up and threw him in the back of the truck. At this point, I was tired of being dropped. So I was like, hey, how about y'all help me get on my feet? And maybe I can just kind of hop. And I had guys on each arm, and I kind of hopped my way over. And the investigator that was driving the truck is a very good friend of mine. And he told me that he remembered seeing me hopping and said, oh, buddy's not hurt that bad. He's walking. He's all right. So they kind of hopped me over to the truck. And when they got me over there, I kind of sat down on the tailgate and rolled myself over. And I was sick. I was real nauseous. And I remember seeing Kyle, and Kyle was as white as your shirt because he had lost so much blood. And I remember thinking, man, Kyle doesn't look good. But, I mean, I kind of rolled on him, and he grunted at me. So, he was, but he really lost a lot of blood. So then they've established an LZ. They take us in the truck and drive us to an LZ a quarter mile away where they're going to land helicopters. So I'm laying there, and I'm in the back of the truck. Now, while all this is going on, I'm going to break from that and go to them getting the suspect out from under so the suspect is he's under the deck. They hold him until we get out of there. One thing that we ran into that we talk a little about in the debrief, and you can kind of see in some of the videos, is when they got on the radio and said, we need help down here, everybody that was on that crime scene collapsed onto where we were.
Oh, boy.
And there were guns pointed everywhere. If somebody would have shot, it could have turned into a horrific, scene down there. But nobody did, and they kind of kept everything under control. So they don't want him to have to crawl out over this rifle because they don't know that the rifle doesn't work.
Yeah, you don't want him to get his gun again.
We don't want him to get his gun again. We don't want to have to shoot him because he inadvertently crawled over his gun, and we thought he was trying to kill us and shoot him. So Rock Hill SWAT had a very short statured guy that was out there. And he asked him, he said, can you go and I've got him. Will you crawl under there, reach out and grab that rifle and pull it out and bring it out? So they did that, and he crawled under there and got the rifle out. He was wearing like the old, and you might be familiar, remember like the old 782 gear that the Marine Corps used to use? That was the pack he had on. It was like that old 782 gear. And they made him take the pack off because they were concerned that maybe he had it booby-trapped or, because so much crazy stuff had happened.
Yeah.
So they made him take the pack off, and then they got him to crawl out and got him enough to where they could get their hands on him. And they drug him out. And he had another pistol in his back pocket. He had a revolver in his back pocket also. So they get him, under in custody. And
he's hit too, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, he's hit a good bit. His arm and leg are all shot up. And I believe that when me and Kyle started engaging him, I think he hid I think he stuck his rifle in front of him because the rifle had a bunch of hits on it and it had a bunch of blood on it, like where it hit his hands where he was holding the gun. If you ever do a lot of sims, you see guys that always get hit in the hands.
Yeah.
So, so they get him out. There was our state law enforcement agencies, the SLED, State Law Enforcement Division. One of their investigators was there to work Randy's shooting. He was on scene when our shooting happened.
Oh, boy.
So he goes down there and he's like, okay, I need everybody from the county out of here because the city guys were still there. The city guys took charge of the suspect.
Got it.
So that the county guys didn't, it was a little, it was a little bit of separation. When we would have training, we would always tell the guys to find work, don't be standing around. So after all this is happening, they've stripped all this gear off of us. the team guys start going and picking everybody's gear up and put it in piles in the front of the house. So they catch him and they're like, "Stop doing that!"
I'm gonna guess the investigator goes crazy when he sees that.
He wasn't very happy about that, but but the guys were like almost like in shock. From I wasn't there, but from the way it's been described to me, they were just wanting to get busy doing something. So that being said, we didn't know whose gear was whose for a while. We didn't know my rifle was shot. We didn't know, there's a lot of stuff that we didn't know. So in that deal, I ended up being shot in the upper left leg, the handguard. When I took where my rifle was shot, where I took my hand off to point under the deck was where my rifle was shot.
So it would have hit your hand if you hadn't.
It would have hit my hand if I hadn't moved it. And it went across the round went into the handguard and went across the top of the barrel. And it should have knocked the gas system out of it.
Didn't hit the gas system.
Didn't hit the gas system. The gun still functioned perfectly. It's
crazy.
It was crazy. And the round that was in my helmet. So
you had a couple of really good little bits of luck there.
Yes, it was
unlucky day overall. Bad day overall. 2 moments of really good luck. Helmet stops a bullet it shouldn't.
Yes,
hand doesn't get blown off. Destroyed. Yeah.
And hand doesn't get blown off because it's still sitting up there on the gun. And to quote the mountain, I am big and hard to kill. So
apparently so.
Apparently so.
You've proven that.
But so they take me over to me and Kyle and Mike are over at the they take us to the landing zone. Well, I'm in the back of the truck. I'm super sick. I can't figure out why. I have to lay on my side. If I lay on my side, it doesn't hurt as much. So, and I remember thinking, they had me in the truck and one of the guys was like on top of me just because it was so cold and they had cut my clothes and everything. So eventually and I say eventually, but it was in a very short amount of time, an ambulance shows up. And they load me in the ambulance and load me onto a stretcher and put me in the ambulance. And there's a medic over here, and he's trying to get an IV going in me. And he's working on getting an IV, and they're going to give me some fentanyl. And that fentanyl that's some pretty good stuff.
Yeah, it works.
And it was literally when they pushed it, it was like, okay, I'll just drive myself to the hospital. I'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah. So
I may be dying, but I kind of don't care.
Yeah, I kind of don't care right now. Everything's good. So right before I got hurt, I was working as a patrol sergeant, what we call a road sergeant, and I was in charge of a shift. And anytime that we had a death in the county, even if Nana went to see Jesus, you had to go out and just make sure that there wasn't anything, any problem with it. And we dealt with the coroner is an elected official, but they have assistant coroners that are the ones that come to the death scenes, and unless it's a high profile or something. So one of the assistant coroners is a guy named Butch Lindsay, and me and Butch were on the same rotation together. So most of the death scenes that I went to, Butch would come out, and we had a rapport, and we worked together a lot. And for years, we did this. Well, in all those years of us working together, I never knew that Butch was a paramedic. So I'm in there, and I'm laying in a stretcher, and I'm all shot to hell. And they're putting a fentanyl IV in me, and Butch leans over to me and says, "Hey, buddy, how are you doing?"
Oh no!
And I'm like, "Fuck you, Butch, get out of here! I don't even want to see you."
Not today.
And I did tell him that. I told him, "Not today, Butch, not today." And we still laugh about that. He came to the hospital and saw me, and we laugh. And even when I see him now, we still laugh about, because who's the person you don't want to see when you just got shot? The coroner.
That's the last guy you want to see.
Yeah, that is definitely the last guy. But that was the thing with me, was there was really not much they could do for me at that point. There was nothing, other than make sure that my tourniquet was good and push some pain medicine. They loaded me in a helicopter. There was some discussion about whether they could get me in, because my leg was so swollen. I'm big anyway, and my leg was so swollen that it was hard for me to move around. And they managed to wedge me into the helicopter, and they flew me to CMC Maine in Charlotte. And I learned something about the helicopters that I didn't know. They don't know, the helicopter crews don't know who they're flying. They don't know if you're the good guy, the bad guy, whatever, because when they got me to the hospital, the guy rolls me out of the helicopter and he says, "What's going on?" I said, "I got shot." "How'd you get shot?" "I'm a police officer. We were in a gunfight with a domestic violence." "Oh, okay, well, let's get you to the ER. I was like, okay. And it's a thing, and in in learning about it, they don't tell them what they've got because they don't want them to like overstress the aircraft or
take their time.
Their time getting there. Exactly.
Get lost.
Yeah. So
fly them to Alabama.
They flew me and Mike to CMC, and they drove Randy. Once they stabilized him, they put him in an ambulance and took him to Carolinas Medical Center, which is level 1 trauma center in Charlotte, which is where you want to be. Charlotte Mecklenburg was fantastic through this whole thing. They shut down the whole interstate.
Oh, wow.
Blocked all the exits, blocked everything, drove them straight they never even slowed down going to the hospital.
Were you even aware at that point that Randy had been shot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I knew then. Somebody told us when we got there that the guy had shot Randy. So my sense of time is a little wonky at that point. And I get to
because you've been hitting the head.
Because I've been hitting the head.
And you're on fentanyl.
And I was on fentanyl.
Yeah.
So I go and I get to the ER, and there's already people from the sheriff's office there. And there's people there. And I'm like, I just flew here in a helicopter. How in the world? But I didn't know they had brought Randy up already, and there was already our people were in there, and they shut the ER down. Kind of a couple of the things, and you talk about how this affects your family and your my girlfriend is a dispatcher, and she was off. She wasn't working when this happened.
All right, well, it's not as bad then.
But all of her friends were. And all of her friends were listening on the radio to me being in a gunfight, and they said my name on the radio. So they wanted to call her and say, hey, Buddy's been shot. You need to get to the hospital. But they got told, no, you've got to let the sheriff's office go and tell her that Buddy's been shot.
Go and get her.
So they drive, and this is kind of funny because normally when we would have a SWAT call, I would have my phone with me somewhere in the truck. Somewhere, and if we're sitting around waiting for something to happen, or we got a guy in a house and they're negotiating with him, I'm texting her, hey, this is still going on, everything's all right, we're good, or this is BS, or But when all this happened and she got to knock on the door, she realized that I hadn't texted her, and she told me that she thought in her mind, please don't be the coroner.
Yeah,
please don't be the coroner coming to tell me that he's dead. And it wasn't. It was our patrol captain was there because I was still working patrol at that time. And he told her that he would take her to the hospital, but her sister lives nearby, so she went with her sister. So later on when she got up there, and just to kind of talk about mindset, and the guy that's the patrol captain, she's known him for 15 years, knows him, first name basis, knows the guy. I said, baby, who came to the house? Some patrol dad, some guy in uniform in a patrol car. She had no idea who came. And I was kind of mad. I'm like, did they just send Joe Blow deputy down there to get you? Or, what did they? And it was actually the captain had come to see her. And so I didn't have my phone when I got to the hospital. And I was trying to call. I couldn't remember my mother's number, but I remembered my dad's. And Veronica had already called my dad and told him that I had been hurt. And he was up. He lives in Alabama. And he was up getting dressed. And I remembered his phone number. And somebody gave me a phone. And I gave him the number, and they dialed it, and his wife answered the phone. And I thought I had the wrong number. And I was like, oh, I think I've got the wrong number. And Diane said, Buddy, is that you? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, let me get your dad for you. So I talked to my dad from the ER when he was leaving to come up, to go up there where he had gotten up and was taking a shower and getting in the truck to come up because he's like 6 hours away. But he said that being able to talk to me before that was a big deal.
Settled him down.
So we're all in the ER, and one of the things that we didn't realize, the suspect came in the ER also. And they had to coordinate keeping him separate from doing all this stuff. So they rolled me in. They had to do some scans on me, and my leg was so swollen up, it was hard to get in the scanning machine. And one of the nurses was there, and I was not very pleasant. And she said, just cuss all you need to. I know it hurts. We got to do this. And we got past that. And the funny thing that I talk about is when this thing was going on, when I was out there laying on the ground, when I was, getting a tourniquet put on, when I was getting put in a truck, I don't ever remember being scared like I was going to die. I never had that, oh my God, I never panicked. I never, and probably some of it was my brain was all scrambled up too. Probably wasn't helping. But I never had that feeling, that really scared feeling. And when they got me to the hospital, they were rolling me down the hallway to go to those scans, and I saw myself in a window as I was going by, and I was like, "Ooh, yeah, I don't look so good." And that was the first time that I got a little bit like, "Oh, this is really serious. This is really bad," because the fentanyl was starting to wear off then, and they couldn't give me anything else because they were rolling, because they literally took me from there and rolled me right into surgery. And we were lucky because I had Dr. Wynn, was one of the top vascular surgeons in the Southeast, was coming to work, all fresh, coming to work.
Nice.
And walked right in and started working on saved my leg. They put 12 units of blood through my leg to get the flow back going in it, and got it fixed. And they put so much fluid through me to get my blood flow going again that I swole up, and they couldn't get the wound closed. So I had to have 5 total surgeries on my leg to get it done.
Put it all back together.
And they were, from what I understand, they were very close to going ahead and taking it off at one point. And they got it to work. So I owe my leg to Dr. Wynn. He did a great job. So, and all the guys came in, and we talked to guys about planning for something like that, because it's never going to go the way that you think it's going to go. Like, my thought process would have been in that when I'm shot, Heath is going to go get Veronica and tell her. Well, Heath can't go get Veronica and tell her because he's right there with me.
Yeah.
You know, so the way that you think that plans are going to work or sometimes are not the way they're going to go. And then that was, you know, you talk about time. We started out on the 15th. Randy gets shot on the morning of the 16th. I get shot further on in the morning of the 16th. We go to the hospital. It's still the 16th, all through the day, on into the next night, and then Mike passes late on the 17th. So there was like 2 days there. It doesn't seem like it, but it was a longer time, because I remember when we were doing, when I was in the room, because people came, and that's one thing Veronica really did. People would come and they would want to visit, you know, and I was coming out of major surgery. And I felt like if people were coming to visit, I needed to sit up and talk to them. And I was passing out while people were there. And she finally, and she's 5'1", and she finally marched out, and they had posted CMPD officers outside of all of our rooms. And she went out and told the CMPD officer, if it's not a member of his family, nobody else comes in.
Yeah.
He's got to get some rest. And he said, yes, ma'am, and went out there and didn't let anybody else in. CMPD was great. They had a guy at our room the whole time that we were there. And I finally got some rest, and just people showing up, people coming, it was a crazy scene for a while there. But I spent 10 days in the hospital. Got to leave to go to Mike's funeral. I had to walk or get up on a walker. There was something I had to do that I had to do that for them to let me. And I still had all the tubes and pipes and all that stuff. They just taped it all to my legs and my body, and I put a BDU blouse on and sat down they put me in a wheelchair and I thought I was going to wear pants, but my leg was so swollen up I could never have gotten pants on. And they just threw a blanket over my legs and took me to one of the local ambulance companies brought an ambulance that they could load me up in and took me to the funeral. And then I had to come straight back. They doped me up. They gave me a lot of stuff to so that I could hang in there for the funeral. And then as soon as the funeral was over, I had to go back to the hospital.
And then how long after that were you in the hospital?
4 or 5 more days.
And what was the recovery like? Like, how long did it take you to recover from this?
2 years, probably a good 2 years to get back as good as I was going to get. Because I started with a home health care nurse would come in and because I would get up in the morning with a walker and just make it to go make coffee. And it would take me, just getting up and going to the bathroom initially just would wear me out. And like I would start getting up in the morning and making my way and being able to make a cup of coffee was like my first thing. And then I had a home health care nurse that kind of worked with me, got me, and that's kind of where we figured out about the concussion stuff. because she was helping me. I was doing some kind of stretching or something on the floor, and she went to help me up, and I got real dizzy and fell down. And she's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm like, "Well, when I get up too fast, I get dizzy." And she laid me on the bed and took my head, and you have like little pebbles in your ears that have to do with your equilibrium. The way she took my head and racked it back and forth a couple times, and it kind of resets that stuff. And we had to do that several times, but it took several of that to get to where my head kind of cleared up. And I saw a neurologist, and you had the physical portion of it, and you had the psychological portion of it.
Absolutely.
That you had to deal with. And that's if I can say anything to guys, is don't be afraid to get the help that you need. Because I couldn't imagine dealing with a situation like this without getting the help that I had needed. And for the whole department, everybody that was involved was offered, and a vast majority of them used the help that was available to them. It's a big deal.
So, buddy, talk to me about kind of the personal lessons learned from this event.
I went through a long time of kind of telling myself that this was my fault, that what had happened was my fault. I would go through this. I had this cycle that I went through where I would get up in the morning, and my girlfriend used to always make me get up in the morning, take a shower, and get my day going. And I would get up and I would get in the shower, and my leg hurt going to the shower, and my leg hurt because Mike got shot and Mike was dead, and it was my fault, and that's how I would start my day. And it took a long time for that not to be, and just to learn that, things happen the way that they're going to happen. We did everything that we could, to kind of make that, not have that outcome. But, sometimes you can still have a decent plan and things can go sideways. Out there that night and after this thing was over, us depending on each other and depending on, if somebody needs something, or if somebody if somebody needs some help and they wouldn't get it, kind of helping them do the things that they needed to do. So there was a lot of, there was one of the things that one of the guys said in the brief, and you've got 30 type A SWAT guys, and you said you've never told so many grown men that you love them in your life, as the way that we all kind of came together after this thing, and still to this day is a bond of going through some pretty horrible stuff, but working our way through it.
Well, one of the things you and I have talked about, before that I think is worth talking about is staying in the fight.
Yeah, we definitely, in our training, even when we did simulations training, even when we did that kind of thing, we knew that we always trained that even if you get hit with a sim, even if you got hit with a sim, you continue to fight, you continue to go on. And when I was hit, and I knew I was hit, I knew that if I didn't do something about it, I was going to continue to get hit. And I took the mindset that I needed to, get off that X and return fire and stay in the fight and get things done. And we managed to do that.
Talking about lessons learned for the team.
We learned a good bit of instant command lessons, kind of span of control type stuff. We went through a long time it was kind of a first come, first serve thing. If you were the first one to get to the call, you were the first one to go in, regardless of your level of experience or what you had. And when we were still kind of working under those assumptions when this call came out, and there were better equipped, better trained guys that we could have used in the Bearcat versus some of the people that were in there. Maybe if we were hindsight 2020, and I don't know that it's gonna, it would have changed any of the outcome of it. We would have had maybe some different people in there. Some guys that weren't like one of the guys was a sniper and had he had an AR, but his primary mission was a sniper. But he just happened to be one of the first ones to get there, and he jumped in the Bearcat because because we were all type A's and we all want to go. But since then, in that endeavor, we have been much more selective about who is going to go and picking the best people that are performing the best. And we try to run our training like you're auditioning every time you come to training. So if you have a couple of off trainings, you might not be that first guy to get in the truck to go when we have a call. And if you're one of the up and coming guys and you're having really good, then maybe you move up to that point and you're the guy that goes, but not just, okay, you're the first one to get here, get in the truck and go. We're a little more selective about that. And we have gear. We now have a guy that ensures that everybody's wearing the proper gear that they should have on. Because when we were preparing for this operation, not everybody had plates in, not everybody had their helmets on, not everybody had all the gear that they should have. And now that is very much, if you're going to go, you have your gear on. We do a thing now where before the team goes on a mission, they empty their pockets, because that way, if you have to put a tourniquet on them up high, they don't have their wallet or a knife or keys or something in their way of putting a tourniquet on your legs. Because everybody out there that got shot got a tourniquet, except for Mike. I got a tourniquet, Randy got a tourniquet, Kyle got a tourniquet. And if I'd have had a set of keys or something in my pocket when they put this tourniquet on way up here, it could have been in the way of it. So now when you're deploying, you don't have anything in your pockets.
That's a really interesting one. What about comms? You said you had a lot of struggle with comms.
Just too many people on one channel. Just too many people trying to talk on one channel and not having that control of where, these guys are going to go to this channel and these guys are going to go to this channel, and just where you're standing there with your hand on the mic, trying to talk, and you're waiting for somebody to stop talking. And it wasn't that anybody was like hogging the radio or talking, overly talking. There was just so much activity that it was. We discovered where it became overloaded. We discovered where things where we needed to branch off and make another channel. And we have kind of guidelines set up now where, okay, if we have an incident and it becomes this big, then we'll get another channel and we'll move some of the people onto that channel so that we can still utilize the radios without it being so clogged up. There was never really an established command post. There was where the commanders were, but there was never like, okay, I'm at here, and this is the command post, and this is where everybody needs to come and get jobs. So that was, like I talked about earlier, we kind of fall down on that compared to the firemen. We don't do the command and control and the instant command stuff. And we lost track of some of our people. There was a couple of guys that stayed out a little longer than they should have on different scenes, and and it was we had a weather casualty. We had a guy that got some frostbite because he got left out. He was out too long. He wasn't going to say anything, but he was stuck out in the cold, and he didn't get relieved when he should have, and ended up getting frostbite. And nothing, he recovered from it. He didn't lose anything, but just things we learned about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so. Do you, and now I'm assuming have communications with Charlotte Mecklenburg?
That has been repaired. We've worked with them. We now have communications with where we have a channel that we can actually talk to their people and we can talk to their helicopter. That problem, but it still took a little while for that problem to get fixed, even after something like this. And some of when we talked about resources and all, having Randy calling the sled helicopter in the very beginning probably saved lives. That us not being able to keep an eye on where the suspect was. The Rock Hill PD SWAT team, I guess the way I understand it, when Heath was coming back from the hospital, when he had dropped Randy off and was coming back from the hospital, one of the Rock Hill SWAT lieutenants called him and said, "Hey, do you guys need help?" And he was like, "Yep, we'll take all you can get." And they sent a whole element in their armored vehicle, and they came out and helped us out there. So that was a big part. They were a big help, and that kind of, anytime you have multiple agencies, you can get a little, or we do things this way and you guys do things this way. But us having this incident, kind of galvanized us into one, good unit that we work well. We work really well with those guys. Our communication could have been a little bit better, like we talked about earlier. Me and Heath should have established communication at the corners of the house instead of we were just planning on just kind of driving back to where the boat was and going from there. And some of the consequences of that lack of communication between the two of us is that we ended up in a blue on blue situation to where one of the officers involved sustained a non-lethal injury as a result of that. And I feel like that better communication between the teams, maybe we could have alleviated that problem. when we talked a little bit also in the we talked a little bit about equipment. We laugh and joke about it, but when they were trying to move me off the X, they dropped me several times. So we ended up getting a portable litter system that goes on to the molly of your vest. So that way, if you had somebody down like that, you could throw it out, throw the person on it, pick the litter up, and take them out. Because you don't realize how hard it is to move somebody until you're actually doing it. And when you don't want to be doing it is, after a gunfight with a suspect still downrange. So we could have had a little bit better night vision and lasers. That's something that we're working on. We're getting a little bit better equipment on that. That might have helped a little bit. Since this incident happened, we got 2 UAVs that we can use. That's our own with FLIR and the cameras and the whole, just about all the capabilities of a helicopter. But it's in a drone configuration that we've used a lot since then. I've sat down with some pretty senior guys and gone over this thing, some pretty senior tactical guys, and a lot of times I give them the, hey, if you had this situation, how would you have tackled it? And to a man, they've kind of said, well, it's really not fair. If they have a lot more resources to use, maybe a K9, maybe we do a drone with a FLIR, things that we didn't have available. So we've in talking about this thing with different people from across the country, we've gotten a lot of good feedback, and we one of the big things also that we were concerned that the guy was going to get in a house. We were concerned he was going to get in somebody's house and take them hostage, and then we were going to have this hostage standoff thing. So that's why we were kind of pushing him, because they were like, well, didn't you kind of push, couldn't you have waited till, well, no, because then he gets in somebody's house, and now we've really got to.
Yeah, because until you identify where he is, which you identify by him ambushing you.
Yes.
He's at large. He's already shot a police officer.
Yes.
And he's looking for a place to hide.
Yes. So that was kind of why we were pushing that. This other equipment. One of the equipment things is when the K9 track was going on, none of those guys took rifles with them. So they only had handguns, even though they knew that the suspect had a rifle. They all took handguns, which they fired back at him when he ambushed Randy and kind of drove him off with the handgun. But if you're the 1+1, if he's got a rifle, we're going to bring 2 rifles. Those are things we need to think about that. Talking a little bit about medical care, putting a tourniquet on Randy. Randy, I think, was the first time that we put a tourniquet on such a severe wound. Was that night. I don't know that we had ever used a tourniquet on anything. And we had them because the tourniquets that they used for all of us that night were manufactured in our hometown. They were American Rescue, and they were manufactured in Rock Hill where we live. Me and Randy went and toured their plant where they make them at, and met with kind of like they do with the saves. Yeah. We went to the plant and talked and thanked them and all, because they weave them, put them do everything together right there in Rock Hill. So the decision to load Randy up and take him to the hospital immediately probably helped out. Instead of we're going to drive him here and wait for an ambulance. No, we're not. We're taking him to the hospital and getting him there. Placing the SWAT medics, having the SWAT medics so close probably helped us. Helped Kyle's survivability definitely. Helped with the way that we got. Those guys definitely earned their keep that night. Because I still firmly believe we'd have lost Kyle if Chuck hadn't been able to get his bleeding stopped. It's crazy, crazy, crazy.
So, buddy, in the aftermath of this, how did the team deal with the psychological fallout and the emotional damage and everything that followed?
Well, we were pretty lucky. We have an organization called SE Leap that does post-critical incident debriefs, kind of where they have it's a peer support group. They have guys that have been involved in critical incidents, and they come and get everybody together and allow them to talk about it. We went to a post-critical incident retreat. Most of the guys have been to it. It's a week-long thing, and it kind of talks about, you talk about your incident, you work with other people that have been involved in similar type incidents and kind of help you understand. And a lot of it is understanding the stresses and understanding the way that your body reacts to all these things and learning that it's normal. I went through a state of like hypervigilance where I couldn't really sleep. Anytime I heard a noise, anytime I heard anything, I was up moving around. Went through a lot of that. Had a lot of psychological, had a lot of stuff I had to deal with. Had to get some counseling. I worked with a neuropsychologist for a while. That was offered to everybody, and most everybody took advantage of it. Most everybody that was, a key player in this thing. And the thing that sometimes I have to remember is once I got to where I could drive again, I go out to get breakfast one morning, and the patrol shift is at this restaurant having breakfast. And I go over and sit down and eat breakfast with them because I knew them. They were the guys. And they were asking me how I was doing. I didn't even realize, but they were out there that night, and some of their guys helped drag me out of the woods. This thing was so, we had a thing that we talked about, and I've said it before, is that, me and Kyle and Randy, and we lost Mike, and we were all injured, but like everybody was hurt by this thing. Everybody in the agency had some kind of, because there was so much, Mike's funeral was you're familiar with who Dale Earnhardt was,
Yeah.
the race car driver Dale Earnhardt? Mike's funeral was at the same church where they did Dale Earnhardt's funeral. And it was completely packed, and you couldn't even get in the doors in there. And the community, we got a lot of support from the community. It was just, I had, and it's kind of carried over. It's carried over into the relationship that we have with the community. And just if anything, just trying to get guys to get the help they need. Not be afraid to get the help they need. Not be afraid to go through and if they're having a problem with something, identify it and move forward.
I think that's a fantastic place for us to stop.
Okay.
Buddy, I really appreciate you joining me, and thank you for coming and sharing this information with us.
Anytime, man.